very good afternoon, and welcome to Chiling's discussion program where we delve into a number of social issues. I am Tiana Jordan, Chiling's Advocacy and Communications Officer, and it's an honor to be your host again this afternoon. I trust that everyone is doing okay and everyone had a great day. Today, our focus will once again be on gender based violence since we're still observing 16 days of activism, and we will be narrowing down our focus to the role of men and boys in combating and reporting gender based violence. And I have with me three guests who are excited to share their views on the topic. But before I get into introducing them, well, allowing them to introduce themselves, I just want to say that this afternoon's discussion falls under our Communities Responding in Emergencies project, which is funded by the delegation of the European Union in Guyana, and it's a project that is focused on supporting the migrant community. And I want to say now good afternoon to my wonderful guests. How are you doing this
Good
afternoon?
afternoon. A
Good
pleasure to be here.
afternoon.
So we have Miss Indra, we have Mr. Colin, and Miss Roxana. I'll give each of you the opportunity now to tell me a bit about yourself, starting with your name, the organization that you're representing, and of course a bit about the work that you're doing. We can start with Miss Roxana.
Okay, so good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name again is Roxana Chichester. I'm a protection case worker for Hayas Guyana. Hayas is an international NGO. We work mainly with migrants and refugees in all around 23 countries around the world. We mainly focus on protection work and gender-based violence work and gender-based violence management. I'm sorry.
It's okay, take your time.
We have also programs as economic inclusion, and we have psychological assistance mainly for migrants and refugees, but also for those sectors of local populations that may need our services as well.
Thank you very much. I really do look forward to hear your contributions on our topic this afternoon. Mr. Colin?
Good afternoon, viewers, and good afternoon to you. I am Colin Marks. I currently serve as a coordinator at Help and Shelter, and I also sit on the board of directors. Help and Shelter has been in existence for close to 27 years, offering core services to victims and survivors of violence. So we do free counseling, we do court support for our clients, we manage a shelter for women. We do a lot of public education work, which is preventative work. We do community outreaches. We also work with men, perpetrators of violence, among some other things.
Thank you very much. And Miss Indra?
Good afternoon once again. My name is Indra Constantine. I'm from Region 3, the Orchid Foundation that is based in Parfit Harmony. Basically, in a nutshell, my services that we're providing to the community is life and skills training. Right? I believe that molding minds today for a healthy tomorrow. So life and skills training, skills, we teach them to do things with their hands. Right? That you have to get the skills. So in the event of some misfortune in your life, you can always lean on something else. I deal with basic social issue that community members are facing, challenges, both gender.
Thank
Right?
you.
So that is basically me.
Thank you very much. And like I said, I really do look forward to hearing each of your views on the topic, which is, the role of men and boys in combating and reporting gender based violence. And Miss Roxana and Miss Indra, you both, work with migrants. So I want to hear from your perspective, about the migrant community. And of course, we have Mr. Colin representing the males today. Let's get right into it. I want to hear, what are your perspectives, or how would you describe the term rather gender-based violence? Or Mr. Colin, you can go
Okay,
first.
gender-based violence really it's an umbrella term, and it actually covers child abuse, intimate partner violence, sibling violence, and any pattern or action of abuse. But for a short-term definition, I would say that gender-based violence is any violence perpetrated against someone just because of their gender. You know, disproportionately women are most times the victims and men are the perpetrators. But of course, you have the LGBT community that also fall under gender-based violence for any violence that is perpetrated against them, whether it be male and male, female and female, and of course there is always the sibling, there's the elderly violence, but any form of abuse, really, gender-based violence is the umbrella term that is used.
Basically, well, I coincide. Gender-based violence is just any type of harm that's committed against against a person and against their, their consent, right? So it includes, as he was saying, physical abuse, sexual abuse, intimate partner abuse, violence against children, violence against persons due to their sexual orientation. It's economic violence. It's obstetric violence. Sometimes that, again, it has so many aspects. It's so, let's say, it's so intricate, so rich, and sometimes we don't. We don't highlight all the type of violence that people could go through. But yes, again, it's mainly named gender-based violence because it has that gender aspect, because mostly is women and girls the victims, right, of these type of violence in general.
That's right. Miss Angel, do you have anything to add?
No, they said it all.
Yeah, and it was simply put. So, persons watching this afternoon, they would have gotten a better understanding of what is gender-based violence. How would you perceive the role of men and boys in combating gender-based violence? What basically is their role, Ms. Roxana?
To me, the role of men is crucial, because even though we can work with the victims of gender-based violence as much as we can offer as much support as we can establish as many strategies as we may, but the work to change society, the work to eradicate gender-based violence, it has to start from within, from the base, from the men, right? To change that perspective that men are always the perpetrator. It's not necessarily like that. So, but because they are in most cases the perpetrators, we need to start working with them to actually change, to actually see a change that, let's say, that's long term, to say it like that.
I want to push back that thread a little further. The boy child is the man child, and even before they were children. And lots of times we work with men. We have a program for men. It's called MEGS, Male Accountability Education Group Sessions, and these are for perpetrators of violence. And we do 7 sessions as a part of our program, and these are men coming from the court. If the court might see there's a reconciliation agenda between the two partners, they would send them to help and shelter. And the court would usually say, oh, go for anger management, but we take them through some more paces. And one of the sessions that we host with them is going back into childhood. And you would be surprised at the trauma that men face, that sometimes is really, really the core causes of sometimes how they act as adults. Not to say that they're not accountable, because as I said, our pillar for that sessions that we run with them is accountability and a review of masculinity as they know it. And these things are really connected to our socialization and the socialization of the boys and the men. And there's some simple things, that sometimes we might overlook, like what they come up hearing, and that's a spectrum. Because you hear, what's in this house stays in this house. Most times that's spoken by a father. Then you hear the man is the head of the house. Then you hear, boys will be boys. Then I grew up, you could guess my age, snaps and snails and puppy dog tails. That's what boys are made of, and girls are made of sugar and spice and all. That's nice. Now these things, these are simple things, but it's the simple things that influence the life of a child. And the life of a child is just a small part of the life of a person. And lots of times there's a lot of trauma carried over into adolescence and into adulthood. from children, and we've identified that. And I bring stories from the because I'm not an expert, I'm a connoisseur more or less. It's more experimental for us when we check the approach that we use with men. I tell you a story of a man, big manager at a company in this country, where he had beaten up his wife and was going through the court system, and he came to us and he said, my father was abusive, and but he was a good provider. And he said, I hated him because of how he treated my mother, but I loved him because he provided well. And then he said, at one session, coming down close to when he was going to leave, he said, what I recognize is that as I grew, I was becoming the same man that my father was. That's the power of our socialization. And that is the story of many boys. And there are cases when the father's not around, so sometimes they're growing up in empty rooms. So they're importing attitudes and opinions of what manhood is about. So that's where it is, really. That's
Yeah.
where it is.
Thank you for
And that's a
sharing
mouthful.
those stories.
Oh yeah, because everybody's life is a story, and lots of times when we work at community levels, that's what we take away from them.
Yeah, and these stories that you would be sharing here
Yes.
throughout our conversation,
Yeah.
these are what persons are going to be relating
Relating to,
So
yeah.
I really like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Miss Indra?
I just want to add to my dear friend here. He said that they have program after the person commits the act,
Yeah.
right? So my encouragement is that, because I do parenting session in the communities, right? And you find that females come out and you listen to them, you listen to their early childhood experience and so. So one day, one of the husband came and said, so Miss Indra, when are you going to start a man session, right? So we don't need to wait until the event, something happened, then the judge send you for counseling. Let's start working within the community, because there are so many programs there out there for women empowerment, right? I know we have Men on the Mission, but you hardly hear anything about them, right? So I was suggesting that we can start a men program within communities. We don't have to wait on the government to come and do something. But of course, it's based upon funding also. But my dear friend here, he is well educated enough, and he can come and start. If it's once a month, men can reach out. Men, gender, boy and men. Because we listen too many times to women cries out, right? And listen to the men, because they do have a story. When you listen to them, as he said, it starts from early childhood, right? And when you listen to them and they go through that counseling, they can start setting example for their children, right? So that little boy that growing up and see his parents lashing out, his father lashing out, can see a change from him.
That's right. And it all comes back when to doing these types of work. Collaboration too goes a long way. Miss Roxana, I want to hear about some of the the misconceptions or myths surrounding men and boys' involvement in combating gender-based violence. Maybe you can speak more specifically to the migrant communities that you work with.
I think as a society, it's not only an issue of migrants, but
General.
as a migrant myself, now living in Guyana, I have noticed that we share many misconceptions. Like, men are supposed to be strong, men don't cry, boys are supposed to be the head of the household, all that kind of things. All those misconceptions also put a lot of pressure on men to behave a certain way, to act a certain way, to be providers. So, and it also put a strain on women, right? When there is this let's say when there is this dynamic, this family dynamics, or this dynamic in society where men are supposed to be the authorities and women are supposed to be the followers, or the soft ones, or the or the ones just minding the house. It's a lot, to be honest, especially when you look at it from the perspective that, well, if men are always supposed to be the strong ones, right? What are they doing, or what happened to their masculinity when they are in a position, in a vulnerable position? Where are they supposed to reach out to when they are violated? How can they express their feelings if they are, let's say, feeling vulnerable, when they are challenged, when they, I don't know, when they encounter any of these challenges in this life that's so rich? Also, to respond a little bit more specifically to your question, sorry, migration highlights a lot of issues in this gender-based violence. Definitely, migration comes with a lot of stress, with a challenge for men to provide for their families because they can't find work as easily as they would in their country, because they, let's say, for example, um, those who speak a different language come into Guyana. Well, I don't know the language, and they don't know how to express, how to cope with that stress. So it translates into violence within their familiar circle. So it's a big challenge.
Thank you very much.
I want to talk about, stretch our program, the program that we run a bit. One of the biggest conceptions for the men, from the men's perspective, is that the laws are in favor of women. We have to do a whole 2 or 3 sessions to really go through the laws, especially with regards to domestic violence and sexual and gender-based violence. Another misconception is that when women say that, listen, I run this family, so I'm the mother and father. Women cannot be a father. The boys require, if somebody is said to hold that position as father, the boys require a particular intimate relationship. Lots of times boys come away with a real confused and complex view of fatherhood when a mother says, listen, I'm your father. Because lots of times on the other flip side, they might be saying things about the father that might not necessarily be cute. Let me put it that way. So you're damning his masculinity because he has no connection to the father already. And you're saying, well, listen, and he sees you struggle really even to keep things together. And he feels a sense of confusion. I've watched boys be confused because we work with boys too in the school system. And I remember one boy saying to me, I threw out some items and I said, choose an item and let's talk about your family situation. Transferring that, get the focus. And he picked up, I had a stopwatch there, and he picked up the stopwatch and he said, when I think about my life stopped. This is an 11-year-old. He said, my dad left and went overseas, and my mom started to focus more on my elder sister who had just gotten a baby, so she was kind of like supportive in the child rearing, and my life stopped. He said he would get into trouble at school and nobody would go to school. And these are stories that are a microcosm of what the male child, the boy child, goes through at school. He's in a system where he might come from a dysfunctional home because frustrated mom, she beats for everything, beat for them to sleep, beat for them to wake up, beat for them to wash the wares, beat for them basic. That's all she knows. And he goes to school and acts up, so the teachers start to beat him, right? So when he looks at what reference point he has as he grows into adulthood, when he might suddenly find himself being a father, he doesn't have a reference point. And that's what I speak about when I say some boys are in empty rooms. Right now there's music that's supporting this view. They're calling it dark rooms. There's a lot of music out there, and the youths are gravitating to it because lots of them understand that with a deep sense of understanding because of their experiences in their families, in their relationship. Because children, not specifically boys, children require relationship, touch, attention, care, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, parents may be so caught up in their life, their
Bread and butter
stress, that
issues.
they don't
Bread and
know
butter issues.
how
Because
it's affecting
lots
their
of times people
children.
think in families that all you need really is to put something on the table. But
Yeah.
there's a table on the inside of everybody that has to be presented.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, Andrew?
Well, my advice is that as you grow and you mature in life, you will have people get married, they have children. And for us to stop these violence is like, for me, this is my opinion, is instead of, if two persons separate, the children are in between. They are in the middle. So what we need to educate both parents is that this child need love from both of them. You should not bad talk, bad mouth each other. So if we have an arrangement that my child must, the little boy or the little girl must spend 2 weeks with his dad, send him there. And when he comes home, don't find out or ask him how your daddy treat you, how your stepmother treat you, because it confuses his brains. Let him be who he is. And if he wants to go and spend more time with his dad, we should respect that. And if that child wants to go and spend more time with his mom, there is a reason why that child is behaving so. Because being a grassroots person within the community, you find that when we go to houses, the families, you hear, Miss, I preferred staying with my dad, or I preferred staying with my mom. What is the reason? Because my dad or my mom spend more time with me, and we as parents, trust me, we cause little children to hate the opposite sex sometimes because of the way we treat them. So we need to educate each other, and life goes on. Leave that child if that child chooses to go there, right? You will see that child. We have something called social media now, FaceTime, and let that child be that child.
Yeah, and when it comes down to maybe redefining gender roles and so on, so that men and boys can play a bigger role in combating gender-based violence, in the prevention and reporting of gender-based violence. How do we go about doing this? I think it all comes down to like behavioral changes and so on. But can we delve more deeper into this, and how can we go about doing this, Mr. Colin?
There has to be a deep sense of equality in the roles that both male and female plays in the whole socialization of a child, and because that's the only way it's going to be prevented, otherwise that we're going to be dealing with interventions. Some statistics I want to quote here now. For the year, it's about 12 women that have been murdered by their partners. But guess what? The very first casualty in intimate partner violence for this year was a man. And so far, I think it's about 9 men have been murdered by their partners. And these things are happening. And that's coming on the heels of last year, when 39 women, peaking over the last 4 years, were killed by their partners. So we need to continue to work, because even though the numbers are low this year, it doesn't mean, because of the reports that we're getting and the responses for our services, especially for counseling and interventions, it doesn't mean that it's going anywhere. The crux of the matter is that the way how persons respond to violence, by the way, Guyana is known to be one of the most tolerant societies for violence. And it's because of how we are raised. We beat our children and call it discipline. I was in a school just the other day, and this youngster, very articulate, and he said, children need to be disciplined. When they do something wrong, they need to be disciplined. So I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, they need to be beaten. I said, yes. Okay, so later on, I turned the conversation back to him. I said, that children need to be disciplined, but not punished. I said, there's a whole element of care. He said, is it different? I said, yes, it's different. I said, when you're being disciplined, it means you're given something to follow. So these are the steps to curb this particular attitude. When you're being punished, what you got? Anger, pain, I said, those ingredients, later on, those are the ingredients in a domestic violence cycle. You know? And he was taken aback. And later on, I said, "Well, how about you Christians and so on and thing? The word discipline comes, and it's kind of connected to disciples." I said, "You know about that?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, you ever heard anybody beating those disciples?" I said, "They were taught things. They were shown ways. They were shown models to effect a particular impact." And I said, "That's what you got to learn from. You got to learn from a model that is going to bring the impact and the change that your parents want to see in your attitude." And then they said, "Oh, we've got it." Because that's the thing we do. Our approach really is not to go and tell children, "Well, we have what you want." We take their stories, their experiences, and we give them a chance to offload, and then we provide them something to take in and seed. And that's what has to happen with the work that we are doing. We have to seed it for a harvest, because that's how we live. We live in a cycle of seed time, harvest time. Because what we're reaping here now, there was a time before.
Miss Roxana.
Well, in my case, I coincide with you that gender roles are something that we need to, let's say, restructure in a certain way. I think also that it's important to maybe reform our education system, maybe work from within the communities, within the families, to change these values, change these roles. And not necessarily, because I know some people are very, let's say, attached to those roles, and we understand that, but certain things need to be changed. In the sense of, for example, not only women are supposed to be nurturing one, because if you just put the nurturing the family in the shoulders of women, then you have a father that's abandoning the family because they don't know what to do with the family. I mean, like, it's like, what is this? It's a family. I don't know, what am I supposed to do with this? Just provide for them? And that's when a lot of stress happens right within them. And again, we at HIAS, we had a project with the UN Women that was also that was about positive masculinities and enrolling men or engaging men in the fight against gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. And one of the best, one of the ideas that we got from that program is also that men feel a lot like they are just seen as perpetrators, like they are just seen as these I don't know, angry, violent beings. And I think we must change that. Once society stops seeing men as just violent, we will achieve a lot of change in society, because men are a lot more than that, right? As human beings, they are a lot more than that. They deserve better. Definitely, they deserve to be seen as human beings as well. They deserve to have the space to offload their feelings. They deserve positive role models. They deserve an equal place in society as well, because as much as society sometimes it's very disadvantageous for women, society also puts men at a disadvantage sometimes. So that's my take on gender roles.
I think, when men hear the views or hear how women view them, they would eventually think, oh, that's how they think about me. Well, that's how I am. Miss Indra?
I think men see, when you talk to men, I was going to add to her, they say men are dogs, right? So I refer to one of them. I said, but do you know dogs are very loving? Dogs are very loyal. So if you see yourself as a dog, see yourself as a loyal dog, a loving dog, because in North America, even in Guyana here, people like dog, they love dog. So I told him, if you're being aggressive, right, people will say you're a bad dog. So if you want to be a loving dog, you have to portray these things. And he laughed, you know. So society sees men as like a monster. That is how they look at men, because they're aggressive and so, but men are very loving. I can say that because when you talk to some of them, right, especially those that have anger issue, and so when they boil down, they're very loving. Isn't that true?
Yeah, the key to what we do is offering that space where men could be vulnerable and be able to unpackage. We have heard in that boardroom where we meet those men, we have heard some stories, and it's stories that you understand they're coming from a place of trauma, and like there is no place to go, and they have to face all the stereotypical view that men are. Well, it's not really stereotypical, it's statistical, because if over 8 or something percent of the persons who were abused are women, then that same figure corresponds with the men who were abusive. What I think men of themselves need to get into is advocacy, because we've been called lots of times and told by men that, what happened, y'all have no services for men? We said our counseling services is the entrance level, that you could come in and talk to us, and then we will see, even if we don't provide that services directly that you want, then we could make a referral. Because like for instance, shelters, there are no shelters for men, because it's a kind of a foregone conclusion that, well, men always control the shelters, always have a place to stay, you know, and that's not always true. So in these areas, men really, really need support. They need resources to be for those kinds of services for men, definitely. But overwhelmingly, the men who struggle with violence in their relationships and are perpetrators, they need a space where they could be vulnerable but accountable. We always stress accountability. And of course, sometimes they come to our program kicking and screaming, they're not supposed to do this because they do this. And they do it all for her. And then we say, so what do you do for yourself? And then they start to think. But really and truly, that's just where their whole emotions are incubated negatively into the whole expression. But it's not their masculinity really, it's their experiences. It's not their masculinity.
Yeah, and you know, at Help and Shelter, you have your program where you give men that space.
Yeah.
That starts discussions, and you know.
Oh yeah, and we coin it convo therapy, because it's conversations we actually offer them to offload conversations. Sometimes we have 8 men in that room, and the man who comes for the first time is given an opportunity to offload. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but when he looks around, he sees 10 men in the room, myself and my other colleague, and 8 other men. So he feels kind of comfortable, and he's slow in it, and he starts to talk. So we call it convo therapy. That's the approach that we use.
Yeah, and you see, you don't have that capacity where you can meet, you know, men from the interior regions and so on.
No.
So,
No. And we kind of really chisel our services for those men who struggle with violence, as opposed to just the man who might have another need, probably housing and that kind of stuff. But I mean, they're all connected, and if we could get the resources to do our program in other places, oh, by all means, you know.
yeah, so how can we reach other, you know, communities, other men, maybe not only in the migrant community, but in interior location?
Well, for us, we do community outreaches, and inevitably, it always comes up, why are not men present in this conversation? Why are not they not present? But it has been the practice for years. You go into a community and you say, listen, we're going to have a workshop. Women turn up 90%. You know, we always tell men that, because they come to you and say, what happened? Ain't got nothing for men. We say, yeah, this here is for men. You come and make your views here, and then we'll take it from here. You know, we were so impressed. We had a training in Region 1 a couple of months ago, and we had 19 police officers, uh, community um, policing group officers in that room. 19 men of the 36 participants. Really, really powerful sharing. It was really dynamic. And of course, some of them after time had to tone down the rhetoric because they wanted to think. But it's just the energy, it's just the testosterone, I guess, you know. But it was really good. And we saw the need even more to offer men a space exclusively to offload and that kind of stuff because they've got some issues that sometimes they struggle with that nobody sees. And it's traumatic.
That's right. Do you want to add something?
No, it's a very true thing that sometimes men just need a space, just a safe space to be themselves, to express themselves, and to learn in a positive way. It's highest. We had the positive masculinities program. We had it in with men in Region 3. We had it with men in Region 4 and with men in Region 7. And we had, it was approximately 40, more than 40 men. And we had 11 Guyanese men as well. It was an amazing experience, to be honest. It was so rich, and we just realized that men just need a space to speak up. They just need a space to speak up, a space to interact, to share experiences, and through those experiences you will definitely see change, because it's a nice phenomenon, because they will like start advising each other. Well, look, this is my experience. I deal with this issue on this way. Sometimes one of the biggest issues that we present is communication. Like, how do we communicate when we're facing challenges in a positive way without escalating the matter, without going to violence? So it was very interesting that they were like literally just sharing experiences. Like, well, you could put it this way, or you could put it this other way. It was very rich, and again, it was a space where they could just be men, be themselves, express their masculinity in the way that they felt comfortable with. And I think that's what's needed in our communities, in our schools, with our boys, with our men. Unfortunately, as he was saying, sometimes men don't turn up to the activities because of whatever challenges that life has, work, or they just feel a little apprehensive because, again, there are so many women sometimes.
Yeah.
So they feel a little apprehensive to participate. But maybe creating spaces that are exclusively for men could be a step that we could we could take, to promote this positive masculinities, I guess.
Yeah, and I think a lot of persons still need to come to terms with that same term that you keep mentioning, positive masculinity. And I think there are a lot more conversations that need to be have on this same positive masculinity. But of course, we can't go into that this afternoon. When it comes to men who experience gender-based violence and so on, and for them to come out and make a report or so on, they might feel ashamed. And you would have mentioned they persons oh, they're the man of the house, or they don't want to report it because of what people may think and so on. How can we make things easier for them, aside from creating these safe spaces and so on? Like, how can a man who experienced gender-based violence just say, okay, I'm gonna go report it, without having to think about what maybe the police officer might think about him and so on? Miss Indra, you want to add to this?
That is very difficult, because you can encourage that man to go to the station and make the report, and he goes boldly, and when he reached there, some remarks from the police turns him off, right? So we need also to educate the police officers, because these police officers sometimes they just want to, oh, I'm going to take a statement, and they just write something and it's not a statement, right? And when the guy thinks that he will have to go to court and all these things, it's just gone under the table, right? So we need to educate the police officers. So when a man step into the police officer, into the police station, that police will listen to him, and not in the public, not in the room. Take him in a room, just like what we do to women. Sit with him and talk to him and take his report, not to embarrass him, because sometimes when you walk in that police station, there are others sitting there and everybody listen to your story. So we need that service, right? Because when a man going in, when he turn and we see all them things, 10 officers sitting there, then you have the cleaner, everybody, and you're talking your story there, you know. They say bush have ears, so put him in a safe room and listen to him, you know. Take his statement, treat him just like how you will treat a woman.
I guess some structural support is needed there. Reporting GBV or reporting DV is a challenge even for women. We did a survey, and quite frankly, lots of the police officers are not fair with how to deal with a sensitive issue. And it's there in the law books, how you're supposed to engage. And this I'm talking for victims of violence across the board. It's supposed to be dealt with in a kind of a really sensitive, because it's a sensitive area. It's a sensitive, it's a crime and it's sensitive. Women face some very, very repulsive actions too by police officers, and sometimes it's not boisterous. It's just a simple statement like, "Is where you do the man now? Make he beat you." That is a turn off.
That is a turn
So you
off,
could
true.
imagine now a man coming to tell a man that, "Listen, my wife has been abusive to me." We were doing some training with some police officers, and and this is what drives the whole conversation. The police were telling us, "Listen, men face abuse at a higher level than women," and they were talking about verbal abuse because women would go off and that kind of stuff. And they said it's difficult to report that, but it's not difficult if the officers sitting there in inquiries understand that there are services for persons who are victims of abuse. And it doesn't have to be a court story. It's two persons in an intimate partner violence relationship. Let's get the third person in to try and work with them. So counseling is one of the most integral steps there. But right away, the police officer, being a man, and his ideas of masculinity is incubated through the same socialization process, and he's saying something's wrong with this guy doesn't know to handle his business. And sometimes he doesn't verbalize it, but the man senses it. And lots of times men don't go back. Lots of times women don't go back to the station when they go to report, because somebody speaks to them across the room. "How can I help you, madam?" And they're right away. And they would tell everybody, "Listen, if you got a case like that, don't go to the station." But it definitely is a bottleneck where reporting is concerned. We need some more sensitivity. Training, I think, needs to be consistent. And it needs to be really, really rooted in the day-to-day income and flow of persons coming in to deal with DV matters, because some officers, just like some people across our society, see domestic violence as a personal thing. It's a man and woman thing. We were working with teachers, and that's what the teacher said. "Oh, it's a man and woman thing." That kind of stuff. And so you could understand they might not be sensitive to a child who's been witnessing DV in the home and coming to school and acting out. So everything is connected
It's a
to the other
cycle.
thing, and that cycle continues, and we've got to stop it, break it somewhere. It's work.
Yes.
It's work.
And having conversations like these
Yeah.
definitely helps
Yeah.
in some way.
It's work.
Would you?
Definitely. Well, concerning Concerning the topic, in Hayas we have regular trainings for service providers, such as it could be police officers, medical staff, other society organizations. Actually, we will be having one on Thursday on the frame of the 16 days of activism against violence, and I think these kind of trainings are essential to see a transformation on how we manage, how we provide services to victims and survivors of gender-based violence. Not only the female ones, but also the men. Some of the men, and specifically Guyanese men at the masculinities group, they were saying, well, we go to the police and we get laughed at because, well, if your woman beating you, you are not a man.
Right.
So they feel extremely discouraged. They feel again that the law does not, is not made for them, because how women apparently, quote unquote, get so much support and men don't. So again, there are protocols for the management of gender-based violence victims, but that's something else. But I strongly consider that frontline service providers should have extensive sorry about that, extensive formation, let's say, on these topics, not just like one workshop and we are done with the topic, but do a continuous education on them, because it's a sad situation how we are facing violence right now in this society, and how we are managing domestic violence, especially from, again, frontline service providers, police specifically. It's pitiful. I'm sorry to say that, but it's very pitiful, to the point that victims are being re-victimized when they go to make a report. So definitely continuous training, exhaustive training is very much needed.
And probably oversight and monitoring, just to make sure.
As well.
Yeah. There's a lot you've all said in this conversation this afternoon that, will definitely stick with persons this afternoon. Maybe some things they are probably now understanding, now getting to know what is really going on in the system and so on as it relates to gender-based violence, especially when it comes to men and boys. That's our focus for this afternoon. I want to give each of you an opportunity again to just, highlight the services that, each of the organization does offer to persons. So if an individual watching this afternoon wants to reach out to you for some kind of help, they'll know exactly what to reach out for, and then maybe you can each share your contact information and so on. You can start with Miss Indra about maybe some of the services also that you're able to offer to persons under the CRIE project.
Well, first of all, we offer face-to-face counseling, and we also do group counseling. We provide services with the same gender base, anything that we are not just domestic issue. You might face some kind of challenges within your home, right? You feel free to come and talk to us. Our services are free. We also do educational program, parenting session. You just call us. My number is 670-0643. You can call me, WhatsApp me, and we try to reach at you. If you can't come to the office, you call and we go to you. That's the service that we provide.
Thank you very much.
Right, so Help and Shelter added to the free counseling services, court support services, shelter services for women and girls, and community outreaches, We also have a hotline, a bilingual hotline also, and a normal English hotline. So our office number is 225-4731, 225-4731. Our hotline number is 613-1811, and our bilingual hotline is 608-2097, 608 also 2096. Those are our two bilingual hotlines. And I mean, we have two current projects where we're working with migrant the migrant population in Region 9 and Region 1. That has given us a tremendous experience in their livelihood, how it's affected by violence, but more or less to how we could help them through our public education outreaches to kind of weather the storms and provide for them sometimes that network of referrals for the services that they might need. We have had cases where we have brought people from as far as Region 1 to be at our shelter, and were successfully able to put them through a program and rehabilitate them, and now they had a scholarship through one of the programs that we were connected to, and now they're working and that kind of stuff. And this is a person who came with a family, and this was just because we had a project in the community, and though they were so far from Region 1, we facilitated plane tickets and everything. Help and Shelter also offers these services for overseas-based persons who might come here, get involved in a relationship. It's a domestic violence situation. They had to be removed from where they were. They end up at our shelter. We would help to repatriate them by buying their tickets and that kind of stuff. That has happened to, from people from Canada and Jamaica and that kind of stuff. So our services are really geared for intervention style, and they are totally client focused. Totally client focused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hayas Guyana. We mainly, refer to this topic. We offer the services of prevention and management of gender-based violence. We have, again, service providers workshops. We have workshops for the general population. We work with, again, and I highlight, we work with migrants and refugees, but survivors, victims of gender-based violence from the local community, please reach out. We are more than happy to welcome you into our organization. We work in 3 regions. Specifically, we have Bartica. We work in Bartica. You could reach us at 608-1433. We also work in Georgetown. You could reach us there at 608-2913. And in Mabaruma, you could reach us at 608-1432. Here in Georgetown, we have an office located at La Luni Street, 84 La Luni Street. If they feel like, they cannot make a call, or for whatever reason, they could just reach out directly to our offices. We also have a Facebook page. You could just Google it, type it in, Hayas Guyana. You will find our address, our contact numbers. Please reach out if you are a victim of gender-based violence, no matter if you are male, female, not gender conforming. We will welcome you with open hands.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing, your contact information and so on. Do you have any final comments before we wrap things up this afternoon?
Everyone deserves to live a life free from violence. Everyone.
Sandra, would you like to leave a message with
Well,
persons?
everyone is free. Everyone can make an opinion and a difference within their self. All they have to do is educate their mind, and think differently.
Well, for me, it will be that everyone has the power to create difference. We are powerful within ourselves. We have the power to work against violence. We even have the power to eradicate violence, and we have the power to make a difference in society. And I hope that, maybe this conversation today had going to inspire a couple of men around there and some people in society, right, to again exercise that power to make a change.
Thank you, and I want to thank each of you for, you know, participating in this afternoon's discussion. I really enjoyed listening to your various perspectives and, your contributions to the topic on the role of men and boys in combating gender-based violence. I do look forward to collaborating with you again in the future. Um, and on behalf of Chiling, thank you very much. I want to thank persons for tuning in to our discussion this afternoon. It falls under our Communities Responding in Emergencies project funded by the delegation of the European Union in Guyana. I do look forward to having another conversation again. And of course, I am Tiana Jordan, Childing's Advocacy and Communications Officer. I do wish you a wonderful rest of your evening. Goodbye.